Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Driven Shot podcast. My name is Peter Muneme, also known as Barca DNA on Twitter. And today's video will be more of a general video, a breakdown and discussion really about Barca's most recent form, particularly the game midweek against Chelsea, its implications, and also the implications of Barca going top of the league after their win against Alaves this weekend. And so, without further ado, let's get to it. So it's been a very complicated week, to say the least, for FC Barcelona. The loss to Chelsea, the quite frankly embarrassing defeat for Barca at Stamford Bridge, really did put a cloud over the team and their confidence, the way they were feeling. And then a few days later, Barcelona, quote unquote, bounced back with a 3-1 win against Alaves. It wasn't convincing, it wasn't the most reassuring performance, but Barca, after a tough loss, hit back and now find themselves top of the league after Real Madrid drops yet more points against Girona. So what does all of this mean for Barca? What does this mean for Hansi Flick? And what takeaways can we have going forward? I think first and foremost, a lot of the issue with talking about Barca this season, especially in a critical manner, is you often find yourself repeating the same talking points over and over and over again. Whether it's the lack of it, Rafinha in the front line, maybe Barca missing players through injuries, for example. We've talked about it at length before, whether it was Juan Garcia or Pedri or Rafinha or Lewandowski, now Firmino Lopez. It just seems like injuries are always a factor to discuss when talking about Barcelona and their form this season. Likewise, the glaring hole that was left by Inigo Martinez when he left the club, and the fact that Barca have not been able to find any sort of concrete replacements for him in that position. Then you couple that with the fixture congestion, the amount of matches the Barca have to play back and forth, then with the international break, then with the injuries to Lamine Yamal and trying to recover from that, and then the drama between him and the Spanish national team, and really the noise that's surrounded the club a lot this season, and the pressure that's been mounting and mounting and mounting on Hansi Flick, and the questions regarding his style and whether or not he is going to change in order to adapt this season. Now, here's what I will say regarding the game against Chelsea. I think if there are some takeaways that we can look for and take out of this game, the first for me would be looking at some of the players and wanting to look at them in more detail to understand, do they have a path in this team going forward, especially in big matches, and are these players who you can count on at the very top level? The first player who I want to bring into the discussion, of course, is Ronald Araujo. Now, this is a topic, Araujo, that we've had to talk about for a long time as Coolers, whether or not he has the capacity to be a Barca first-team player, especially in the biggest matches, wearing the captain's armband. Is this a player who Barca can depend on? Now, I'm going to be brutally honest and say no. It sounds harsh, but it's basic reality at this point. For Ronald Araujo, wearing the Barcelona shirt in big matches, it's a shame because when he first broke onto the scene, his defining attributes used to be that in big matches, he would step up. He would be, a warrior. He'd play with his heart on his sleeve. He'd embody everything that you'd want a Barca defender to be. He really carried maybe the spirit of Carlos Puyol in some of those early games. I remember, of course, the highlights of him marking Vinicius when he was playing as a right back in those big matches there, and how many times he would shut down Vinicius there, rive up the crowd, and really just put together a really compelling performance in that role. And nowadays we watch Araujo in big matches, and it's a complete calamity. For me, the first symptom of this would have been the Super Cup. This was back under the Xavi era when Barca lost, I believe it was 4-1 against Real Madrid in the Super Cup there, and Araujo getting sent off against Vinicius in that game. Then we fast forward to, again, still in the Xavi era, the Champions League game against PSG, a monumentous match for Barca. They were already ahead in the tie. They had won the first leg, taken the lead in the second leg, had a 2-goal lead, and were in a very, very good position to go through to the semifinals. Araujo misplaces a pass. The ball's played in behind. Araujo's up against Barcola, who's taken a very, very awkward first touch. The ball is going likely towards Ter Stegen. Araujo, all he has to do is let Barcola go. Worst case scenario, he scores, and it's Barca 1, PSG 1. Barca still would have had the lead, and given how open that game was, Barca would have had more than enough tools to hurt PSG and go through to the semifinals. Instead, he makes a reckless decision. He pulls down Barcola, gets sent off, and that right there cost Barca the game. A massive moment there in Araujo's career. It was the second time in that season that he'd gotten a red card in a really, really important game. And yet, in this instance, when his feet were held to the fire by Gundogan, Araujo didn't really accept the criticism and perhaps the burden that was put on him after that game. He never really took accountability in his game after that, didn't really seek to improve, instead complained, and as a result, he never has really improved. He's never taken a step forward since that moment and really grown as a player. We still see the same immaturity and the same tendencies from Araujo in these games where he's too rash, he tries to do too much, he makes reckless decisions, and ultimately can be a liability in these big matches. We've seen him, even under the Hansi Flick system, struggle a little bit there against Inter Milan, for example. They're coming off the bench for Inigo Martinez, not marking Acerbi, letting him get across him to score the equalizer late in the game, a moment where Barca were so close to reaching a Champions League final. Yet he comes on, he was really, really poor. And then for Tezi's goal that saw Inter win the game, again, very, very poor from Araujo defensively, did not cover himself in glory there once more. And ultimately, Barca goes out of the Champions League. Now with Araujo, he's always been vocal to say that we're going to see the best version of him. In fact, that's what he said at the start of the season, that we were going to see the best version of Ronald Araujo. And to be fair, the fans have largely always given Araujo a chance. He's always had people who would defend him, who would look to say, you know what, there's a player in there under Hansi Flick, things will work out. He's got the perfect build to work in a Hansi Flick system. And yet we see consistently that, especially in a system that demands a lot of discipline, that demands a lot of focus, that demands a lot of thinking in terms of making sure you're in the right position, you're in line with your teammates, you're reading the game properly. We see that when that burden is placed on Araujo, he simply can't meet it. And especially as well when it comes to his work on the ball. If you're depending on Araujo to receive the ball there and be good with it at his feet, distribute passes, especially under pressure, it's just simply not going to work. And especially in big matches, he's always the one who's targeted, and quite clearly so. In fact, Luis Enrique, in a documentary, even made it absolutely clear in his team talk to PSG before that game in the Champions League a few years ago, who are you going to target on the ball? Araujo. Who are you going to pressure on the ball? Araujo. Who is the most prone to making a mistake in a big game, an error to lose the ball? Araujo. And that's simply what happens in these big games there. When Araujo is put under pressure, he makes terrible decisions. Against Chelsea, it was no different, where the first yellow card is a really poor one. He gets it there for dissent by really getting in the referee's face. And for some reason, he thinks that because he's the captain, he's then allowed to just almost headbutt the referee there, getting in his face, getting booked. And then what goes through his head when it comes to the challenge there on Marc Cucurella is absolutely, it's atrocious. It's a really, really poor decision. He lunges in, he's got no chance of winning the ball there, and even if he does, it's the sort of challenge where he could only win the ball by going through the player, by crunching through Cucurella. And when you're already on a yellow card, why in the world would you give the referee the chance, the option to send you off? It's such a lazy and poor decision. Again, reckless from Araujo in a big game. Blood rushes to his head. He forgets what he's doing. Poor challenge, gets sent off. And against Chelsea at that point, look, Barca were not playing well. They were already down a goal. They were not looking at their sharpest, at their best. But at the very least, they had halftime looming and a chance there to make adjustments, make changes, and get back into the game whilst being 11-11. But instead, Araujo gets sent off. He compounds Barca's misery in that first half and ultimately puts them in a position where winning the game against Chelsea was all but impossible. And so with these errors that have piled up over the years there from Araujo, I remember even in his debut against Sevilla, him getting sent off there as well. It just, for me, to be brutally honest and be fair, as someone who appreciates Araujo, especially given the characteristics that he has and what he can bring to this team and what he could have brought to this team had he gone on to achieve his full potential. For me, Araujo, especially in a Hansi Flick system, doesn't work. Even in a system under Xavi, in big games, it just doesn't work. And if you're going to ask me personally, do I think Ronald Araujo should be starting for Barcelona in big games? The answer is no. And if the answer to that question is no, then I cannot see Araujo's long-term future at the club. I think given the fact that he was so close to leaving, to joining Juventus before, given the fact that every summer there are always questions about his future, about a possible release clause, way out of the club, and even more so, I think, given the fact that Araujo, he's a big earner. He's a big earner, and he's a player as well with a big personality. He's not someone who's going to be happy with sitting on the bench for a whole season, especially given that he's entering the prime years of his career. And so if he can't find himself being a starter, he'll likely try to leave. And he was close to joining Juve a few years ago before then having his head turned. Or I say a few years ago, it was really about 8 months ago. He was close to joining Juve, and now all of a sudden, he stayed at the club. And so what I'll say is this. For Araujo, for me, long-term, I don't think he is suited to playing for Barca in these big games, and I do think that Barca has to find a solution outside of Araujo. Now, the next player I do want to address as well is going to be Ferran Torres, and whether or not Ferran Torres can be Barca's solution in big matches, especially as the number 9, given that Lewandowski is clearly getting older and perhaps will be gone after the season. Again, like Araujo, the answer is no. And this is a bit tough when it comes to Ferran Torres because he is someone who clearly can score goals. He's clearly someone who can be a bit part player, who can clearly contribute. The problem is for Ferran Torres, he's not a natural striker. He's not someone who you can give the ball to and say, hey, hold up the ball and bring others into the game. Likewise, he's not clinical. That's the one thing about Ferran Torres as well that's also an issue, is he will have chances, but he's usually a 1 in 3 striker. Those aren't bad, at least bad numbers, but they're not good numbers for a top class striker. He's not the sort of player who's going to deliver you 40 to 50 goals a season. He's not a differential player like Haaland, like Mbappe, like Harry Kane. He's not someone who's going to bully the opposition. He's not someone who's going to, outskill the opposition, pull off moments of brilliance. He's simply someone who's going to be efficient in scoring goals here and there. He'll score pockets of goals here, but he's not someone who you can count on in the biggest moments. And you saw that there against Chelsea, where Lamine Yamal puts the ball on an absolute plate for Ferran Torres. This should be a goal. It should be Barca 1, Chelsea 0 so early in the game. A goal that could have had such massive ramifications on how the game could have gone. And Ferran Torres puts up a really, really poor finish. It's a scuffed effort. It goes wide, not even on target. And ultimately, that for me, it summed up Ferran Torres in a nutshell, where again, against teams like Bilbao, you saw there with one of his goals that just kind of squirted by Unai Simon. He's a player who, Ferran Torres, he can have a good day. The tough part about criticizing Ferran Torres is it's very easy for him to go on in the next game and score a goal. And all of a sudden, fans think, well, he's scoring goals here and there. He's scoring goals in pockets. Surely he's a good player. Surely there's room for him to be a starter in this team. And the simple fact of the matter is, no matter how many goals Ferran Torres can score, even in small games or moments here and there, he cannot produce when it matters most. He cannot produce in the most high intensity games when you need your striker to be clinical. And even if he does in those games, he'll oftentimes, against PSG, he scored. Against Inter, he scored. He scored against even Real Madrid before as well. But the problem for Ferran Torres often is in those games, he'll score 1 or 2 chances and then miss 2 or 3 big ones. Or he'll score a goal, which is great, but the rest of his build-up play, the rest of his play as a 9 completely fails, and it limits the team and limits what Barca can do going forward. And so ultimately for me, Ferran Torres, he's a very good player to have in the squad perhaps, as a rotational piece, as an option off the bench. But if Barcelona, especially post Lewandowski, want to challenge on all fronts, Ferran Torres cannot be your starting number 9. There has to be an element of change there in that front line to where Barca act seriously and look for a long-term solution in the absence of Lewandowski. Now, following Barca's defeat against Chelsea, there were lots of questions about Hansi Flick and whether or not he should change his style, the way he wants to operate, the way he wants to play. Flick has been very adamant about defending his philosophy, his way of playing. He's not going to budge. He's not going to change. And so the question that remains for these players, can they pick up the slack? The problem for Barca right now is defensively, this team has no confidence. These defenders are not bad players. They aren't awful players, but they're playing with no belief in themselves right now because the system isn't working. You see it against Alaves. Once again, Barca start the game very, very poorly, conceding a goal within 43 seconds, within the first minute of the game, and having to play up against it. And even right after conceding, Alaves nearly made it 2-0 within 2 or 3 minutes of the match. And so all of a sudden there, Barca could have been 2 goals down, and then Barca get the equalizer there through Lamine Yamal. And then Joan Garcia is required to make one of the saves of the season, if not the save of the season, in order to prevent Barca from trailing once more right before Rafinha sets up Dani Olmo for the go-ahead goal. And even in the second half there, as Barca went into the game against Alaves, they didn't play with much conviction. They had, again, big chances, didn't take them, and all it took was one move from Alaves, a few passes put together, a ball played across the face of goal, and if not for a massive, massive intervention by Pau Kubarsi, a brilliant recovery block, Alaves could have easily scored and leveled the game. Barca, in the very last minute, through some magic from Lamine Yamal, Barca winning the ball high up the pitch. Yamal then finds Dani Olmo. Olmo with a very good finish there, puts the game away at 3-1, and the score looks flattering to Barca because it was. It's simply the game against Alaves after the Chelsea display that was really, really poor from a collective standpoint really didn't do anything to put away the nerves, the questions, the feelings that surround this Barca team. Now today, Real Madrid have dropped points against Girona. They drew 1-1, which means Barca are now 1 point clear at the top of the league table. Their next game is against Atletico Madrid. And this will be a very big test for Barca. We've seen since the return of Rafinha a change in how Barca approaches their attack. They look much more balanced, they press better, they look more cohesive there, and they look more deadly in the front line when you have that balance of Rafinha, Lewandowski, and Lamine Yamal. Of course, that was the attack of last season that tore through teams across Europe. And so you can clearly see that when those three are together, you see a better version of Barca as a whole. You see a better version of players like Dani Olmo, for example, as well. And you see a team that is more cohesive. Now, what will also galvanize this team is you'll also have the return there of Pedri and Frenkie de Jong, who will both be back against Atletico Madrid, and both should be expected to start in that game alongside Rafinha, Lewandowski and Yamal. And the game being at home means that Barca has a really, really big chance to make a big statement, especially following what happened in the Chelsea game. What also happened this weekend in Barca going top of the league, there's a potential chance for Barca to not only win this game, but maybe even build a lead at the top of the table, because Real Madrid are not in the best form right now, and they're also going to be playing against Athletic Club de Bilbao away from home on Wednesday. So this could be a very, very good chance for Barca in this match to really put together some confidence, to try to answer some questions, some doubters. We've seen Hansi Flick on the touchline there after the game against Alaves, visibly upset, stressed, feeling the pressure of overseeing Barcelona and overseeing this team right now. And Rafinha telling him that the team will improve, the team will get better, the team will at some point click and really raise their level to that of last season. And to me, I'll say this, we've had lots of talk about Barca trying to get back to the team of last season, trying to get back to that level. But for me, it's not just that Barca needs to get back to that level, they need to go beyond it. It's not going to be good enough just to say, well, can this team get back to the level that they had last season? No, they have to go above it. Now, here's the realistic point here to mention. Is that possible? Is it possible this season for this current version, this squad, to be better, to eclipse what they had last season? For me, unless we see a signing of a left-footed center back, I just can't see it. If I'm being realistic right now, the defensive line of this team is still incredibly vulnerable, and without that proper presence, I still think there are some struggles to be coming for Barca this season. That being said, even in the game against Alaves, I do want to give a shout out there to Gerard Martin, who for me was very, very good in that game. Not perfect, but good in that makeshift role. He's the only option that Flick has right now in terms of a left-footed player who can play in the center-back position. And to his credit, Martin was good against Alaves. He played a really big role in the second goal there, a lovely ball over the top for Rafinha, who cut it back for Olmo. He was also very good there at cutting through the Alaves mid-block there with his passes, also being able to bring the ball out of the fence. But you can tell that Martin isn't fully used to playing as a center-back just yet. You've seen a few moments there where he's been a little bit cautious on the ball, maybe taking a little bit too much time and losing the ball there in defense. So he's had a few nervy moments, which is to be expected. But overall, he's done very, very well for the games that he's been called upon. And against Alaves, for me, was the best display we've seen from Gerard Martin in that position. Now, again, it's a big question. Could Gerard Martin, ironically, could he be the solution in that role? It's a very tough question to answer, especially right now. I think what I would say is, for Gerard Martin, it can't hurt. The performances that he's putting in, the way he's playing right now when called upon in that position, even if it's sporadically, it can't hurt. And so if he continues to have games in that position and continues to grow in confidence and belief in his ability to play in that role, then, I mean, why not? You know, he has every chance right now this season, especially because Barca are not going to sign a left-footed center-back likely until the summer. And so if Gerard Martin can continue to grow into this team, to mold himself into this new position, then why not? You know, why not have the chance this season to build that confidence and say, you know what, I can stake a claim to own this position in the future. I don't think it's impossible for him to do that. I do want to say, though, I'm not going to be premature and act as if Gerard Martin is the next coming of Paolo Maldini. I love the jokes that we have about him there on Twitter, but I do want us to relax a little bit there and just kind of see, you know, not rush to judge him in a bad way or in a good way, but rather just waiting to see if he can continue to put together these displays as a left-sided center-back. Now, for this team going forward, there are other players that we can discuss. There are other things that we can talk about. But this video is getting a bit long. I don't want it to be too long for us here as we're approaching 25 minutes here for the video. So what I do want to say is this. This type of video for me, it's one that I've wanted to make for a while, and I've wanted to make more of a general long-form video just for us to have a chance to really discuss Barca's season in full, to discuss key players who I think perhaps long-term don't quite have a future here, especially they're looking at the ones like Araujo, Ferran Torres. You could even look at a player like Marc Casado this season and say, has he done enough? Has he done enough to really impress in this team, to nail down a spot, especially given the injuries we've had? Likewise, there can be questions over Dani Olmo, especially with the emergence there of Fermin Lopez and how good he's been this season, and how right now, when fully fit, he is the first choice starter in that number 10 position. And with other players there in La Masia, the likes of Dro, the likes of Tony Fernandez as well, gearing up, is it possible that Dani Olmo has a future in this team? Now, I'll say this. Olmo, of course, scored a brace at the weekend. He is a very, very good player. He's by no means a bad player. He just has not been at his best this season and hasn't played with the confidence and the authority that he had when he first joined the club. He's not quite as sharp as well as he was during those first few weeks. He seems as if he's even maybe a bit heavier than he was when he first joined. He seemed, when he first arrived, very slim, very agile, very mobile. And yet this season, it's just seemed a bit cumbersome. He's a bit off the pace there. And also as well, even apart from the 2 goals that he scored against Alaves, he gave the ball away on numerous occasions in really, really bad positions. So Olmo, for me, still has a lot of work to do to earn his place back in this team, especially as a starter. He is going to have the chance to start against Atletico on Tuesday. It's a massive chance for him and a really big moment for him in his Barca career. Can he have another very good display? Can he perhaps really take hold of this game and grab it by the scruff of the neck? Can he reestablish himself in this team as a starter, especially over Fermin Lopez when he returns from injury in just over a week's time? That's a very big question, and one that could define his career at Barca, especially post this season. Now, moving on to Hansi Flick before we close out the video here. There has been, for me, a lot of questions regarding Hansi Flick, and specifically questions about, can Flick adapt? Can Flick be a manager who makes adjustments to his style? Can he be someone who adapts his team and says, you know what, when things aren't working, I'm going to make a change. I'm going to alter how we play and how our shape looks. For me right now, I still have those doubts for Hansi Flick. I still think that Barca are too easily penetrated, broken down, and it's too easy for any team, whether it's Club Brugge, whether it's Newcastle, whether it's Alaves, whether it's Real Madrid, whether it's PSG or Chelsea. Barcelona get exposed far, far too easily in transition. It really only takes 2 or 3 passes, a switch of flanks, a late run coming from the midfield, fullback to fullback, and it's just far too easy. The blueprint to break Barca down, just a little bit of pace, the high line they're getting breached. And what bothers me and gives me pause for Hansi Flick is we don't see enough when it comes to the team being able to make these small adjustments or adapt. We see a coach who wants to stick to his guns, stick to his ways, and that's all well and good when things are working and you're winning. But when you aren't, it creates a storm. It creates pressure. It creates questions, not only of the manager, but the players themselves. They hear what the media is saying. They hear the pressure that's on them. They then see the results, the crushing defeats against Chelsea, the defeat against Real Madrid, the defeat against PSG. And when you're losing these big games, and when you're seeing what's being said about you, the pressure on your manager, the questions over the style over and over and over again, these players can easily lose confidence in themselves, in their belief, in their system, in this manager. And likewise, what they can also do is use the questions and the doubts about the system as a crutch and as an excuse. And that's the one thing that is deadly to this Hansi Flick team, is if he, and sticking to his guns here, if he loses the dressing room. Now, what's clear so far to me, which is a very good sign, is that this team, they love Flick. They absolutely love this manager. They're willing to run through walls for him, especially Rafinha. And these players have said on several occasions that they know that they can do better. and that they want to improve and that they want to bring forth a better version of Barca. So clearly, these players haven't given up on Flick. Now, where I've been critical of Flick is I've said this, that if Flick, for me, if he cannot bring it in himself to adapt, to be able to add variations to his tactics that can help this team, especially when they're struggling, when things clearly aren't working, if he sticks to his guns and the team goes trophyless and catastrophically fails the season, then I wouldn't blink if he was sacked. I wouldn't blink if the club said, hey, we're going to move on. Thank you for the amazing transformation that you had given this team, the trophies, the way you changed the team's mentality and style. Thank you for this brilliance that really should not be understated. He has done absolute miracles, Hansi Flick, with this Barca team. But at the same time, you cannot be a coach at the very, very highest level for the biggest club in the world and not have variations to your tactics and not be able to change and not be able to be flexible, especially when you're being exposed time and time and time and time again, and yet you refuse to change. You refuse there to make those adjustments, and in the end, it ends up costing you. Now, that's been my critique of Flick this season, right? Whilst I am still very much, Flick in, I very much love this manager and want him to succeed, love the way he plays, love what he's brought to Barca. My critique has often been, look, if you're going to stick to your guns, fair play. You have my respect and my kudos, but you have to find a way to make things work, right? When the ship is sinking, if you're going to stick to this way of playing, okay, you have to find a way to rescue the ship. You have to find a way to keep the team on course and to keep the team competitive. Now, not much has changed. That critique is still there in regards to how I feel regarding Flick right now. I am very much Flick in, but at the same time, I'm going to be brutally honest. If you're not willing to adapt and the team does not improve, the team continues to struggle, and you don't make any changes, then for me, you cannot be a coach at the top level. You simply won't survive because those around you will continue to get better, and they'll continue, the more you play and interact with them, they'll become more and more aware of how you play and how to counteract against that, which is what we've seen this season for Barcelona, especially in the Champions League and in La Liga to a certain extent. Now, what I will say though, is that especially after this weekend here, I do want to be fair, because what perhaps I haven't acknowledged in the defense of Hansi Flick is after the miracles that he worked last season, instead of being given a stronger team, his team was weakened. And there was nothing he could do about it. Instead of watching his team get stronger, he lost a key pillar in his defense. And then Barcelona as well did not add many pieces, apart from Joan Garcia, who was a brilliant signing, a brilliant and masterstroke signing. Outside of that, and then adding Marcus Rashford, who's really helped, especially in the absence of Rafinha, Barca have not made enough improvements in key areas there. We've seen Barca struggle in midfield. You didn't replace Inigo Martinez. You've seen the issues in the fullback areas where, because there is no depth, you've seen Eric Garcia have to play so many minutes there in different positions. We've seen Koundé this season really, really struggle for form and confidence. And then Balde pretty much, again, being run into the ground at times, getting injured. And then George Martin playing between left back and center back. And we've just seen a team that should have gone from strength to strength instead get weaker, and Flick have to deal with those ramifications. So in his defense, he's not been dealt perhaps the best hand by the board. And perhaps in the board's defense, their arms were tied behind their back this summer and they couldn't do as much as they wanted to. And so what I will say for Flick is this. For me, I want this team to be competitive. At the very least, if this team can be competitive this season, whether or not we win every single trophy on offer is fine. I want this team at the very, very least to be competitive. That being said, in the summer, especially now with Barca being back at the Camp Nou and being able to make key signings to invest in this team, to improve this team, Flick has to get his wish this summer. Barcelona have to strengthen this team for Hansi Flick. He has to have the players that he wants, especially there in defense when it comes to the center-back position, when it comes to a backup left back or right back, when it comes to maybe an extra midfielder as well, and especially a striker, given that Lewandowski will likely leave after the season, there has to be a solution long-term for Hansi Flick. The board has to make sure that he has the players that he wants. At that point, when he has those players fully by his side, it'd be a lot easier to judge him there and have questions over his style and his manner of playing compared to now when he's having to really work with the bare bones here of what he has at the club. Now again, my critique of Flick is still present. I still want him to show some signs of being willing to adapt and make changes when it matters, but I also want to be fair and acknowledge that he's not had the easiest time this season with the cards he has been dealt. So that'll be it for this video. It is a bit of a longer one. I've taken some time to put this together just because I felt that this long-term discussion was warranted, especially given Barca's recent form, the questions, the concerns, whether or not this team can bounce back this season, whether or not this team is truly ready to compete on all fronts. For me, the honest answer to that question is in the Champions League, my answer is no. Right now, this version of Barca isn't ready. Now, could they be ready in February or in March? Maybe. But right now, if you're going to ask me, can this team beat Arsenal? I would say no. Can this team beat PSG? No. Can they beat Chelsea? No. Can they beat Real Madrid? Honestly, maybe, but still, you've got questions and concerns there. So for me, until we see Barca, again, mature a bit this season, until we see the players pick up the pace and really get back to, again, not just getting back to last season, but exceed those levels, I just think this season, at least in the Champions League, that will be a push too far, at least based on the evidence of what we're seeing right now. Now, domestically, can this team win the league? I don't see why not, mostly because Real Madrid are not convincing right now, although what I would say is don't be surprised if Atletico Madrid and possibly Villarreal are the teams to actually worry about this season domestically, because keep in mind, Atletico are very, very close to Barca, only within 3 points here of Barca before the game there on Tuesday. And then likewise, Villarreal have been brilliant this season. They've had a really, really good start to the campaign. Now, whether or not they'll be able to keep that up for the whole season, or maybe perhaps this is a story similar to Girona, where they'll be good for a while and then fade after the season goes on. Regardless, they have been very, very impressive this season, so a shout out to them as well. And could they possibly challenge for the league as well, or at least for their sake, get back into the Champions League? That would be a delight to see. But for Barca, domestically, I still think that this team can win, perhaps La Liga, maybe even the Copa del Rey, and of course the Spanish Super Cup as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Barca could win at least 2 of those trophies, 2 of those 3 domestic titles this season. But I still think right now, until we see further change, perhaps maybe if Barca are able, by some miracle, to sign players in January, until we see some form of adjustment, I cannot wholeheartedly say that this team is ready to compete on all fronts, especially at the highest level in the Champions League. But that'll be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I know it is a bit of a longer one, perhaps the longest episode we've had in a while of the Little Drop podcast. So thank you very, very much for watching, for your attention. And I will see you very, very soon for Barca against Atletico Madrid on Tuesday for the match review. So until then, take care, stay safe, and Visca Barca.